Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, welcome to the webinar today on preparing for a sanitary survey. During the webinar today, everyone will be kept on mute to ensure audio quality. If you have a question, please type it into the GoToWebinar question dialog box at any time throughout the session for it to be queued and asked to our presenter. We will be posting the presentation as well as a video recording on our EFCN website. You can reach that website at the bottom left-hand corner at efcnetwork.org. You will be receiving a follow-up email that includes links to all of these materials and any other information that you may need for accessing those documents. Registered attendees can receive a certificate of attendance for participating on this webinar today. This webinar has not been submitted to licensing agencies for pre-approval of continuing education credits. We will provide a certificate of attendance as a courtesy for self-submittal purposes. We do provide certificates of attendance as a courteous, so we do ask that it can take up to 30 days to send out your certificate of attendance. And in order to receive one, we ask that you attend this entire webinar. Also join to this webinar using the unique join link that was emailed to you when registered, for that's how we count your attendance. Again, we cannot guarantee this webinar will meet requirements for specific CEU or licensing renewal needs, but if you have any other questions about this, you can email us at smallsystems@syr.edu. And for just a little bit about us here in the Environmental Finance Center Network, our program provides training and technical assistance to small public water systems in all U.S. states and territories to help local water systems achieve their goals and stay in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And here you can see the various centers that make up the Environmental Finance Center Network. You can see that we have centers and partner organizations spread across the entire country for this year's programming. We all work together to create solutions for difficult how-to-pay issues of environmental improvement and protection. And so on that note, to jump right in, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. With us today, we have Lori Blau, a Rural Development Specialist with the EFC Region 10, or RCAC. Lori, welcome, and I pass everything over to you.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone. While I launch my PowerPoint here, I will just say good morning or good afternoon, whichever time zone is appropriate for you. And let's see if I can go ahead. There we go. All right, so I'm hoping you are seeing my screen right now.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So as Savannah said, this is on preparing for a sanitary survey, and I am Lori Blau. And I am a Rural Development Specialist with EFC Region 10, or RCAC, Rural Community Assistance Corporation. And some of our standard that this presentation has been developed with funding from the Environmental Protection Agency through the Environmental Finance Center Network. And RCAC is the EFC for Region 10 EPA. Rural Community Assistance Corporation, or RCAC, is part of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, which is a nationwide association of similar organizations that do similar work throughout the U.S. And as you can see, RCAC is out here in the West, and we cover the Western states, including Alaska and Hawaii. And this is me. Hi, I'm waving at you. I do have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, a master's in engineering management, and a master's in teaching. I have spent a majority of my career in industry working in environmental systems, and have been with RCAC for 2 years now. So just to kind of get a feel, there's too many people in order to have you mark on the map where you are. And so if you want to just type into the chat box where you are located, and Savannah will kind of track that and kind of give us a feel for the room to see where we are. I am in Spokane, Washington, which if you look at the map here of Washington, it's just about straight over from the A in Washington and right on the Idaho border.
Thanks, Lori. So folks are letting us know, and we are from around the country, from Alaska to New York, Iowa, Colorado, you name it, we're on the map.
Great, great. It's good to get a good broad sense. So the objectives of this course are to understand what a sanitary survey is, so to understand what will be inspected and what records are needed to be prepared for the sanitary survey. And if you can be prepared, it goes a lot smoother for you and for the surveyor, and it can help you avoid significant deficiencies. So a quick poll here. We want to see who is in the room. And are you a manager, an operator, or some other role? So Savannah is going to launch that. And then we will share it in a minute and see what everyone's role in the system is. It just kind of gives you a flavor for the room, since we can't all be in the same room and stand up and say, I'm a manager, I'm an operator, I do administrative work.
Thanks, Lori. We'll leave this poll open for just a few more moments for folks on the call. And we'll get ready to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. So I just shared the results. Lori, are you able to see those?
No, I don't. I am not able to see those. Maybe you could just read off for me what the percentages are.
Of course. So 68% of folks with us are from the other category, 18% are an operator, and 14% have selected manager roles.
Okay, perfect. All right. So that gives me a little bit of a feel for who we've got here. So we're going to start out with what is a sanitary survey? And I promise you this is the only definition from the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFRs, that I will read you today. But a sanitary survey means an on-site review of the water sources, facilities, equipment, operation and maintenance of a public water system for the purpose of evaluating the adequacy of the source, facilities, equipment, operation and maintenance for producing and distributing safe drinking water. A lot of words, but what it basically means is it's a method to help you provide safe drinking water to your customers. And so next we have another quick poll. And so I would like to know if you have been through a sanitary survey or not before. And so this is a pretty quick and easy yes, no.
Thank you, Lori. We'll leave this poll open for just a few more moments here. And getting ready to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. So Lori, 67% of our attendees have been through a sanitary survey and 33% have not.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that gives us some idea. And so sanitary surveys are a way to evaluate the multiple barriers that are in place to protect drinking water. And some of these barriers can be chemical methods, such as disinfection or treatment. It can be mechanical, such as filtration. It can be process, and it also includes testing. And sanitary surveys are required generally every 3 to 5 years. And community water systems are typically surveyed every 3 years. Transient non-community systems are at least every 5 years, could be every 3 years or something in between, depending upon the primacy agency. And the transient non-community or non-transient non-community, they also can take into account your compliance history in determining how often to schedule a survey. And if your system is scheduled for a sanitary survey, then the surveyor, whoever that may be, which we'll talk about in just a minute, will contact your facility to schedule it. And so sanitary surveys also can provide an opportunity for technical assistance providers or primacy agencies to assist operators especially in small systems with limited resources, about new techniques, technologies, and procedures. And it also serves to enhance communication between the TA provider, the system, and the primacy agencies. We're all working together to provide safe drinking water. And so who performs this survey? Well, it could be someone from the primacy agency, whether that is EPA, a state health department, state environmental department, depending upon who is the primacy agency for the system, or it could be a technical assistance provider or contractor. Here in Region 10, for the tribal systems, Indian Health Services and EFC Region 10, we conduct sanitary surveys on tribal systems. So who should attend a sanitary survey? Well, definitely the operators, because they know the system and what happens every day in there. It's also it's also a good idea for the owner or utility manager to attend, so that they clearly understand the status of their drinking water system. And administrative contacts who may be handling the paperwork, record, etc., may also benefit from attending, so that they know what is expected in terms of record keeping. They also know where the records are, so that they can be easily accessed and gone through. So now what? It's been scheduled. So you need to prepare for questions about the general operations of the system, management issues such as budgets, plans, records, security of the system, so that someone can't get in and tamper with your drinking water system, and also specific technical questions. So how do I prepare? So I look at a sanitary survey as a two-piece thing. There's a records review and a field inspection, and we'll talk some more about those. A sanitary survey typically covers 8 areas, and the ones I've marked here with asterisks, I'm going to talk about in a little more depth as we go through this. We can't talk about all of them in depth in this period of time, but the sources, whether it is groundwater, surface water, groundwater under direct influence, a spring, the treatment is evaluated, the distribution system is evaluated, finished water storage is another important area, pumps and pumping stations, monitoring and reporting, that includes all of your compliance samples and getting those reported to your primacy agency, management and operation, that includes things like standard operating procedures, O&M, and operator compliance, which is operator certification. Oops. Wait, sorry about that. So how do I prepare for a survey? So if you have your records ready for review ahead of time, it'll make it more efficient for everyone. And so getting your records organized prior to the survey will help. And there are a lot of records that we look at, and we'll go through some of those. And the other important part to prepare for is the field inspection. And so that includes making sure all the areas are safe, making sure that you have all the keys, and that all the parts of the system are accessible. And if parts of the system are owned or operated by other entities, you need to make sure and get access ahead of time and arrange for access ahead of time. You need to make sure tank access letters are operable, and make sure that tank overflows and drains are visible. Oops, on the wrong screen. There we go. So what records to get ready? Let's talk about the records. The different parts of the survey have different records that are looked at, but when I go through and do the sanitary survey, I like to go through all the records at once and then do the field inspection. So I want to talk about the records first. So you want to get together your previous sanitary surveys and be prepared to discuss any findings and their resolution. You need to have the current population served, the number of residential and commercial connections, lists of active and inactive sample sites, and what your plant output is. And these, the second through five, 2 through 5 on those are for updating the water facilities inventory, monitoring and compliance schedules, and the water quality monitoring program. And because some of the samples depend upon the size of your system, like your population will affect the number of coliform samples that you have to take. And some other things, any new facilities that have been put online since the last survey, any changes in sample locations, ones that are no longer available, monitoring plans and current sample maps, testing results, your bacteriological, chemical testing, chlorine residuals, need to have all those available. And the system schematic is very helpful. And the schematic doesn't have to be really complicated. This is one that I had sketched out for a system, just using Word and text boxes. And so they can be fairly simple, but it just shows the flow so that someone new coming in, a new operator, kind of can look at it and go, oh, okay, here's what the system does, here's the pieces of it. It also helps the primacy agency so that they know the steps in your system. Some other records are storage tank cleaning reports and list of certified operators, and copies of well logs and well abandonment reports. Now, a little bit about these. So you need to know the dates that all of your tanks, including pressure tanks, were last cleaned and inspected. You need to include the results of that and any actions that you took. In Region 10 for the tribal systems, if a tank has been inspected within the last 5 years, then they don't cite anything. If it's 5 to 10 years, they've been citing it as a minor deficiency. If it's greater than 10 years or unknown, then they cite it as a significant deficiency, because these tanks should be inspected and make sure that they're clean and that they are in good shape. List of certified operators, that includes the certification number, the certifying agency, the level of certification, and the expiration date of the certification. And if you're a groundwater system, copies of well logs and well abandonment reports. Now, the well abandonment reports are important because when you have a well that is not used, but it's still there, it provides a direct conduit into your aquifer, and it can allow contaminants to go into your other wells. So if you have a well that you are no longer using and will no longer be using it, then you should go through the steps to properly decommission it. And that depends upon your local jurisdictions to have different requirements for doing that. So if you're a surface water or groundwater under direct influence, then you probably have a disinfection profile that you should have ready. For all systems, cross-connection control plan, operation and maintenance, or an O&M plan, emergency response plan. And I've put asterisks on those last three there, the cross-connection control, O&M, and emergency response plan, because those are ones that small systems oftentimes don't have, and they have processes, but they don't really have them documented. And so those are oftentimes cited as a significant deficiency. And there may be other paperwork depending upon your type of system, such as water purchase records, consecutive system agreements. So say you're buying water from another water system, and those agreements and where the connection is, that type of information. So, Savannah, let's just do a check. Do we have any questions that have been put in so far?
No content related questions at this time.
Okay. All right. So let's go with our next poll. And that's, what type of water source do you have? Do you have a groundwater source, surface water, spring, or if you have something else like just purchased water, type that into the chat box.
Thanks, Lori. We'll leave this poll open for a few more moments here to let folks submit their answers. We do have some folks typing into the question and chat box, so those will be counted as well. And we'll get ready to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. And so, Lori, 66% of attendees have selected groundwater system, 32% of attendees are using a surface water system, and 2% have selected spring.
Okay. Okay, great. And there were some that were typed in the chat box?
Just pulling that up now. Yes, we have groundwater. Some folks have indicated that all of the above.
Okay.
Purchased water. And then, so again, some folks have had ground and surface water.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't think to include both as an option in the poll. So thank you for typing those answers in there. Okay, so let's talk about the field inspection. So checking these items before the survey can minimize the likelihood of being cited for a significant deficiency. And here we're going to talk again about making sure the facilities are accessible, that you have keys to open the buildings, the gates, on storage tanks, on the ladder that's on the outside, which I'll show you a picture of in a few minutes. There's often a plate that slides over to keep someone from going up the storage tank. And I have been to surveys where that lock would not operate. And so you need to make sure that those are all available. Make sure your facilities are safe. There's no exposed wiring, uncovered pits, things like that. And make sure that everything is working. Make sure your pumps, your chemical feed pumps, and other parts, filtration, are all working. Make sure everything is clean and orderly. You don't want your pump house to be just a massive storage room for everything that doesn't have another place to go. You should also be looking to make sure that you don't have a rodent issue in your buildings. And if portions of your facilities are owned or controlled by other entities, contact them prior to the survey to coordinate access. I have been on some surveys, at least one, where the pressure tanks were stored in a locked room in the casino, and only security had keys to that, and they were not available when we were there for the survey, so that couldn't be inspected, so that ended up being a deficiency. So make sure that you have the ability to access all the parts of the system. Make sure that your chemicals and spare equipment are stored properly and not just haphazardly stacked around. So here's some of the things that the surveyor will look at out in the field. With the sources, if you have a well, is the area around the well graded away from the well? You don't want surface water flowing towards the well, as that's a potential contamination. Does the well extend a minimum of 18 inches above the final ground elevation or 12 inches above a pump house slab? This helps prevent potential flooding of the well. Are all the conduits sealed? And are there any other openings into the well? I haven't personally seen it, but I've seen pictures of like cut in the casing. Whereas if you had any kind of water level coming around there, you could be getting contaminated surface water going directly into your well. So you want to make sure that any openings into the well are either high enough that they wouldn't be flooded, or that they're sealed, or vents are screened, and we'll talk about that as well in a minute here. There it is. Vents and vacuum breakers are screened with 24 mesh non-corrodable screen. And are there any openings, other openings into the well? And I have a few pictures here to show you of some different types of caps. So this one on the left, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but we'll try it. The little opening here on the kind of lower right side, that would be typically where the conduit goes through. And then you can see these two screens on either side of that. And so those screens need to be in place to vent the well. This one in the center, it has a flat top that comes out with the distribution going, to the treatment system. And so they have this pipe that comes up out of the well, and it's got an elbow that is turned down. You don't want these turned up, you want them turned down, facing down to the ground. And then there's 24 mesh screen over that is fastened with a pipe clamp. And then this green one is another type of well cap that you see. And in these, the vent screen is usually up under that top portion. I have seen a few where it's down here along the side. And so those are just a few different places, types of well vents that you'll see in well screens. And why do we worry about vents and seals? Well, you don't really want this being your drinking water source. All the little creepy crawlies that can get in there and contaminate your water. So for springs, you want to look for surface drainage pathways into the spring box. And make sure that the spring box is not at risk of being submerged like a well. And if the spring box or enclosure is properly constructed, it should have a hatch box similar to storage tanks, which we'll talk about in a minute again. It should have a roof. It should have an overflow vent, and the overflow vent should be screened with 24 mesh screen. The drain pipe on the collection box should also be screened. You don't want things crawling back into your drinking water system. And with surface water sources, you want to look at, is the source subject to industrial, domestic, or other types of pollution? Are there, what's upstream from your intake? And are the intakes protected from silt buildup coming down the surface water source? Are there multiple intake locations? And what about control over your watershed? Now, source water protection is a whole nother area, but is there restricted activity? Do you own the area around your watershed? Most systems do not, and so you have to work with other agencies and land managers and landowners to work cooperatively to try and protect your drinking water source. So let's talk a little bit about storage tanks. In this picture, you can see that the access ladder doesn't start until I think that was about, trying to remember, it was about 12 or 15 feet up the tank, I believe. And that is designed so that someone can't just come along and decide to climb up and mess with your water storage. And so this is one of those, we'll refer back to this picture in a minute, but the surveyor will look at overflows and drain line discharges, and they either need to have 24 mesh non-corrodable screen or a properly sealing flapper or duckbill valve. And you need to make sure that they're accessible. You should be looking at these all the time anyway, but I have seen ones that are completely overgrown with grass, blackberry bushes. I'm sure in other parts of the country there are other vegetation like vines that grow prolifically. And so you should be out there and making sure that those are accessible and visible all the time, but especially before a survey. And here's a couple of examples of some overflow coverings. You can see this one on the left has a flapper that would flap up. This one in the middle is similar. It's just a little bit different design. And the one on the right here shows the overflow with 24 mesh screen, so that again, you don't want insects or other things coming back up your overflows into your storage. So tank hatches should also have a shoebox lid that overlaps the opening, and this was what I was talking about with springs as well. It needs a gasket that's in good condition and a locking mechanism that is there and locked. And so here's a couple of pictures of those. You can see in this one on the left, you can kind of see it. They're latching mechanisms, and the lock is way down on the far end of that. And this is what we call a shoebox lid. And when you look at the two pictures, you can see how that shoebox lid goes over the top of the hatch opening. This gasket around the top of the lid is what we're talking about in terms of inspecting the gasket on the storage tank lid. This gasket should be inspected regularly and needs to be in good condition, because otherwise you get spiders, insects, other little creepy crawlies that can crawl up under that nice covering and protected, and then they can get into your drinking water, your finished storage water there. A couple more things on storage tanks. The tank vent needs to have the 24 mesh non-corrodable screen as well. Are there any leaks? And then the tank has been cleaned and inspected in the last 10 years. So here's a couple of examples of tank vents. This one on the left, that is a properly screened tank vent. This one on the right is not. It was very common, I think, in older tanks, but that doesn't really, if you just have this kind of expanded metal, that is not going to be considered a 24 mesh screen. You need to have something else in addition to that. And these vents should also be downturned so that you don't have a bird flying by and decide to contaminate through the screen, if you will. We'll just leave it at that. And so you should also note that in some areas, surveyors are not allowed to climb standpipes or elevated storage tanks. And surveyors will also not climb unsafe tanks or ladders. And so if your surveyor is unable to climb your storage tanks, then you will need to make sure that that you can get a picture of the storage tank, and you'll need to take pictures of the vents, the hatch, the inside of the hatch. They need to be either taken at the time of the survey or dated. And make sure things like, if you need a ladder, like that first picture I showed you of the storage tank where you need a ladder to access the one that's built onto the tank, you need to have that readily available. It needs to be properly tied off. And it needs to be safe to use. And so that is that's a real important point. And again, that was where I had said before about the metal plate that goes over those access hatches. I have had situations where you they couldn't get the lock to open on that. So making sure those things all work ahead of time will make sure your survey goes a lot smoother. If you do have to provide pictures of the storage tank, they should have means of having the date recorded in the picture. So after the surveyor will go back and compile the information, and the primacy agency will then review it. The surveyor send it to the primacy agency, and the agency reviews it, and the primacy agency will either issue a notice of deficiencies or a notice of no significant deficiencies. The wording may change depending upon the primacy agency and exactly how they handle that. Sometimes, depending upon the agency, they will fill these out just while you're there and give you a copy. That kind of again varies by system and by primacy agencies. So if you do have significant deficiencies that are identified by the primacy agencies, then you typically have 120 days to correct the deficiencies, or you have to submit a corrective action plan or a CAP to the primacy agency. And that corrective action plan, you will need to say why you can't correct it in the 120 days, what your estimated time is to correct the deficiency, and then the primacy agency will have to accept that corrective action plan. And you are responsible for making sure that happens. And again, this is why having managers involved in the sanitary survey is important, because they typically control the budgets. And so they can help get the resources necessary to get the items corrected. And just a little bit on significant deficiencies. Sorry, it's Monday and my mouth is not wanting to work today. But a significant deficiency can include defects in design, defects in operation. Say you don't have an operation and maintenance procedures. It could be the failure or malfunction of anything, whether it's the sources, the treatment system, the storage, the distribution system, that the primacy agency determines could be causing or have the potential for causing the introduction of contaminants into your drinking water system. And if they are left unaddressed, significant deficiencies typically create a significant public health risk. Minor deficiencies, on the other hand, could become significant if they're not corrected. And so that's just kind of a general description of the difference between a significant deficiency and a minor deficiency. So with that, are there any questions? And you can type them into the chat box. Savannah, have we had any?
Yeah, we have had a few questions. So again, for folks on the call, please type in any questions that you have for Lori. And Lori, I'm just gonna start reading them off to you.
Okay, and I'm gonna put up my contact information in case while we go through these questions, so.
Great. So the first question we received was, with regards to finished water storage, what is used to enforce failure of inspection or clean deficiency?
Okay, so if you are not inspecting your finished water storage, if I'm understanding the question correctly, then in a sanitary survey, they will cite a significant deficiency. And if you don't correct that by inspecting and cleaning, if necessary, the finished water storage vessel, if you will, then it can become a violation. So any significant deficiencies that are not corrected can become violations.
Thank you, Lori. And I guess to kind of jump off of that, we just received a question of, are there fines associated with these problems?
Boy, I am not positive on that. I typically with any kind of regulatory violation there oftentimes can be a fine. Um, but I don't know specifically on how that works or when it would go to a fine. And I think it could also vary somewhat by jurisdiction. So I am afraid I don't really know the answer to that one.
Not a problem. We have all this information recorded, so we can always follow up offline. So the next question, and this is with respects to WST hatches. Have you been requiring NSF 61 gaskets? They have been difficult to find for small quantities.
Right. That is the preferred. If you can't find that, then you can use something else, but I would consider the other, the non-NSF type gasket material to be a temporary measure because it shouldn't be contacting the water, but it is, you should have the NSF gasket material if your gasket is in bad shape and you need to do something temporary. I think that practically it's better to have something there than have the chance of things crawling into your storage tank.
Thanks, Lori. So the next question that was asked is, what is the mesh size that's required for storage tank vents?
Right, 24, what they tell us is 24 mesh non-corrodable screening is what's required.
Great. And just moving on through, we have received quite a few questions. So on to the next. Do you have a self-audit guidance to prepare for a sanitary survey?
Let's see, the best thing that I would say is, well, there's a couple of options. One, you could go through your previous sanitary survey, and if you don't have one handy, you can always contact your primacy agency, or they usually have them on their website. Like Region 8 EPA, I believe. Those are pretty easy to find, their sanitary survey forms. You can look on epa.gov as well, and you can look at basically the sanitary survey form and see the checklist and see the what the surveyors are going to be looking at. And I don't have the link right on the top of my head, but I believe there is also on epa.gov, I believe there is a checklist for preparing for a sanitary survey. It seems like I've seen that as well. So there are resources, and you can also, if you can't find that, I would try your primacy agency first, would be my first suggestion, and then epa.gov and go from there.
Great, thank you, Lori. And so to the next question, could you please expand on the disinfection profile? And the acronym is used GWUDI.
Okay, sorry about that. The environmental field is full of acronyms, and it's easy to throw those out without thinking about it. So disinfection profile, I haven't worked with a lot of surface water systems, but I think the disinfection profile talks about how what kind of treatment is needed in order to properly treat the surface water. Sorry, I don't have a better answer than that. The other one, the acronym, was GWUDI, which is groundwater under direct influence. And so it is a groundwater system that is either not in a confining layer where surface water and things that happen on the surface can permeate down into the groundwater system. So you could have a well that's a GWUDI, which means that surface water contaminants could be filtering down into your groundwater. So an example of that would be like a groundwater well that is very near a surface water body. So say a river or something. And so the water and the contaminants that are in the surface water could be coming through to the groundwater well. And so that just requires a little bit more analysis of potential contamination.
Great, thank you, Lori. And so to the next question, does the primacy agency have the authority to extend the 120 days to provide the cap?
Yes, they do. So if you can't get it completed in 120 days, then you have to explain to the primacy agency why you can't get it done. So maybe it's something like you need to um, clean your storage tanks, but you can't get or clean and inspect your storage tanks, but you can't get one within that 120-day period. And so that would be, I would say, an example of where they would extend that. And you can say, okay, I can't get them in by this date, but I can have them here by this date. And that's where they would say, yes, okay, we accept that date. And so that's now your compliance date.
Thank you, Lori. And to kind of jump off of that one, can a utility, if they have a deficiency that is noticed on the walkthrough, can they fix it right then and there, or do they have to wait?
Absolutely. And screening on like pressure relief valves, or like a vent, like that one vent screen that we showed that had the downturned pipe with the screening over it. Absolutely. And what I do if we go through and there is something like that, it's like, yeah, if you can fix that right now, then I will mark it off as fixed on site, and then it doesn't become a deficiency. So absolutely, because the purpose is not of a sanitary survey is not to go, aha, I got you. It's to protect the drinking water and provides clean or good, safe drinking water. And so, yeah, if there's something that can be fixed as we're walking through, absolutely do it. And the surveyor will oftentimes make note of it, but they'll just say, hey, we noticed this and took care of it, done. Not an issue anymore.
Awesome, thank you. And so to the next question, does the primary agency have to accept the plan, or does it have or do you have the opportunity to review it and make recommendations? I'm so sorry, I read that question wrong. My apologies. Let me reread that. So,
Okay.
the primary agency have to accept the plan, or does it have the opportunity to review and make recommendations?
You mean, I'm not sure if they're referring to the survey or the corrective action plan.
Okay, if that attendee could just type that in, if they have the quick second to, we can jump back to that question. So moving down to the next, an attendee asked, are intrusion alarms on potable tanks, do they fall under the sanitary survey, or is this only under a vulnerability area, i.e. risk or resilience?
I could share. See, I haven't actually seen any of those, but one of the questions on the survey is typically if the facilities are secure. And and I guess just having an intrusion alarm that somebody would be going out to check if that went off. I guess that's it's not something I've ever seen required on a sanitary survey. And I kind of tend to think that would go along with a vulnerability assessment. But the whole purpose of that is to make sure your drinking water system is secure from tampering, And so intrusion alarms can be part of that. I haven't personally seen any on any of the sanitary surveys that I've done.
Great, thank you, Lori. And so I did hear back to the question prior. It was in regards to the correction action plan, if the
Okay.
agency.
Okay. So yeah. So what I have typically seen happen is the primacy agency issues the significant deficiencies, and then there's usually, with the systems that I've dealt with, a spreadsheet, if you will, that that EPA gives the system with those and says, as you need to fill this out and document that you have corrected these deficiencies, and it has to be back by a certain date. And if you can't get it corrected by that time, another great example is operator certification. So say you don't have a certified operator and you need to get an operator certified. That's not typically something that can happen in 120 days. That takes a little bit of time. And so you can say, okay, we've enrolled our operator in operator certification training, and we expect them to be certified by this date. And so then if your date is too far out, then the primacy agency will probably push back. But yeah, that would again be between the system and the primacy agency. So, if you're looking at filling out a corrective action plan and, you're going to say, oh, in 5 years, we'll have our operator certified, they're not going to buy that one.
Thank you, Lori. So to the next question, an attendee asked, is it common for a TA provider to be invited to participate in a survey conducted by the primacy agency along with the water system representatives?
Yes, I mean, what I have seen more often is I've had someone from the primacy agency come along on one of my sanitary surveys. If the primacy agency is doing the survey, then it kind of depends on the situation, and if they think that there is going to be TA, that technical assistance is going to be needed, then they may invite the technical assistance provider to come along so that they can see what their concerns are. And one of the things that happens during surveys is discussions about, okay, this is a concern, how could we address it? And so I'm not going to say it's necessarily common, but it's also not unheard of.
Great, thank you, Lori. So the next question, could you describe the major components of a CAP?
Okay, so it will include, you need to say, okay, so say, let's just give an example. Say your sanitary, the CAP the spreadsheet will say, okay, item 117 on page 6 of the sanitary survey. Not even knowing what that is right off the top of my head, but say it's you don't have an adequate gasket on your storage tank lid, and so it will say item 117 page whatever, and describe what the deficiency is. And then there is usually a blank column for when it was corrected, or if you can't get something corrected within that 120-day time period, the date you anticipate being able to have that corrected. The gasket is probably not a good example because that's something that's fairly easily corrected. But say, let's go back to the storage tank cleaning example. And so your tank hasn't been cleaned in an unknown period of time, 10 or more years, and they cite that as a significant deficiency. Then you can say, okay, I've contacted these tank cleaning companies and the soonest I can get someone scheduled for is a month after our 120 days. So say it's 150 days out. And so you would put that down as your anticipated date. The primacy agency says, yes, we accept this. And then when you complete that, when you get the tank cleaned or inspected, then you update that corrective action plan and send it back to the primacy agency and say, okay, we completed this on this date, and these are the actions that we took as with regard to that. They came out, they inspected, they cleaned a little bit of debris out of the bottom of the tank, and we're all good to go.
Great, thank you. And moving on, the next question is, what is the most important thing that a manager without a lot of technical knowledge of water treatment should get out of sanitary surveys?
Boy, that's a good question. A manager, I think it's important, the important thing for a manager to understand without necessarily understanding some of the technical aspects of it is that they need to know the things that the surveyor is looking for and the things that are necessary to protect that drinking water system. And the sanitary survey gives the manager an opportunity to maybe get a little more technical understanding, and hopefully whoever is surveying can explain to the system, whether it's operator, manager, whatever, why this is a concern and what it takes to correct it. And so it also, I think that it helps. I think it helps provide some of that opening the dialogue between the system and the primacy agency, because everyone's goal is to provide safe, clean drinking water. And so it's it's a kind of a team effort, and the manager is definitely part of that team, and so they can get, I think, some understanding of what is required for that system so that they can devote the resources to it, whether it is funding in terms of buying the correct gasket material, getting the tanks inspected, supporting the operator in maintaining a certification or getting a certification, putting the resources necessary for developing the plans. And so I think that the manager, without necessarily having the technical knowledge, they can have a broad enough understanding of what's required that they can support getting the things accomplished that need to happen.
Great, thank you, Lori. And so we do have a few more questions. So just for folks on the line that have submitted questions that we might not be able to get to live today, we will be able to follow up with you offline. So the last question that we have for you today, Lori, is more technical. Does a distribution pressure test at the customer location need to be recorded? And do you need to have a log available to the inspector?
It's a good idea. Yeah, I think whenever you do those things, I think it's good. As to whether that's regulatorily required, I'm not sure on that, but that is a good piece of your O&M procedures that you should have available, and it's a good piece of data, because then you can show the primacy agency and surveyor, look, we're checking our distribution pressure throughout the system, and you can also, it helps you track if there's a change, which could alert you to a potential leak in the system. And so I think those are good records to keep, definitely. I don't think you want to just go out and do the test and not record it, because Otherwise, it's a lost piece of data that you could have useful. And so pulling that out and showing the inspector that you do that, I think is a great thing to have.
Definitely. All right, well, we have hit the top of the hour here, and I would like to make sure folks can still get on with their afternoon. So I would just like to wrap this up with one last poll question for folks still with us. If you are interested in receiving one-on-one technical service assistance from the EFCN, as Lori said, we have a wealth of information that we would love to help you with. Please let us know and we can reach out, just discuss, see if anything needs to be that we can work with you on. So we'll just get ready to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. And Lori, for you, I just want to thank you for providing your expertise with us this afternoon. That was a great presentation and a wealth of knowledge. I would like to thank everybody that has joined us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to do so. And Lori, I pass it back to you for any closing out comments.
All right, thank you. And thank you everyone for participating in the questions. And you can also, I've had my contact information up here. You can also reach out to me. And there are a wealth of resources out there for drinking water providers. So thank you for attending.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day.